Lovely. And for those who don't have an order of service, that was the Huron Carol. I titled my talk for this morning, Whence the Spirit. And who knows why I did that? I don't even know what whence means. I looked it up. It just sounded right. I looked it up last night, and I found out that in the 1700s, like 300 years ago, it was already archaic. So, whence the Spirit? Anyhow, it wasn't so long ago that very few things happened on Sunday mornings, because it was almost always set aside as church time. And in many places, this was true for Wednesday evenings as well. The expectation was that almost everyone attended church. Businesses and other activities closed in respect of the Christian Sabbath. I can distinctly remember worrying about finding an open gas station or a grocery store because we'd neglected to take care of these things on a Saturday. And I lived on the Maryland side of D.C. Across the river in Virginia, there were so many blue laws and things were pretty much on complete shutdown for Sundays. Churches were a very powerful social and political force. These days, Sunday mornings are not so simple. Most stores and businesses are open, and even family-based groups like youth sports leagues capitalize on this now available time slot for scheduling their programs. In Illinois, there are still a few blue laws on the books, laws that say what you can't do on Sunday. And the only two I'm aware of are that car dealerships aren't open on Sundays, and that's still codified in law unless the local township changes it. And horse racing is illegal on Sundays. I don't think that the original reasons for these rules have much sway today, but they're allowed to stand because they serve the interests of the parties that are affected much more than they serve the demands of the Sabbath. But religion, it's not a growth industry these days. Americans' membership in houses of worship continues to decline. During most of our lifetimes, from 1940 through 2000, a steady 70% of Americans belonged to some religious group. Since 2000, churches have been bleeding members. By 2020, only 47% of Americans claimed to belong to a church, synagogue, or mosque. And church attendance is also decreasing. Thousands of congregations have been shuttered, and many more are experiencing downsizing. And Unitarian Universalism is not immune to this problem. Our numbers are also down, although not as sharply as those of most of the Christian denominations. And the reasons people move away from formal religion are multiple, they're complex, and I can't get a handle on all of it. Some are driven away for cause, like because they can't tolerate their church's malfeasance, such as the systematic sexual abuse by clergy, or because they feel excluded and unwelcome by restrictive dogma, which happened to so many of the LGBTQ plus persons, or persons who support reproductive choice and freedom. But the biggest shifts aren't necessarily for cause, they just seem to be personal and religious in nature. Notably, people show a diminished willingness to accept the beliefs and teachings of the traditional churches. This manifests itself mostly in generational change, with the younger cohorts being far less attracted to religious teachings, practices, and to the religious life. Over the past 25 years, we've witnessed the rapid growth of a new group of Americans that identify as spiritual, but not religious. It's hard to know what this phrase really means, and it's probably different for each person who claims this moniker. I've always just sort of assumed that it's shorthand for, I choose not to be part of a church, but I'm still a good and moral person anyway. But in part, this is because the normative description of being an upstanding church-going citizen was so strongly embedded in our collective psyche. As people let go of church thinking in deference to a more secular approach to life, they needed a new standard to point to in support of their claim of moral rectitude. For a very short while, we UUs felt that this would and should be our time, our calling, because a large swath of America was looking away from dogmatic church and trying to reinvent their thoughts about issues that religion had tried to explain for them. We hope that persons with a new openness to interpreting belief and a flexibility in defining their life path would be natural candidates for involvement in a UU congregation. What we have to offer should be ready-made to meet the needs and demands of this new generation of seekers. But alas, very few of the nuns, as this group has been termed, found their way to our doors. And we don't really know why. Some of it is that we carry an association with church and religion and our own self-identification. And these are precisely the things that these folks have decided to leave behind. Some were harmed, others just disinterested. Some UU thinkers claim that we just haven't done a good job of making our brand known, and that most potential UUs are unaware of what we might offer. What we do know is that many of the people who do find our churches are pleasantly surprised, and that most who find us do so through personal connections. A good thought exercise, though, is to think about what we truly do have to offer to people who left other religions behind and who consider themselves spiritual but not religious. We could spend days unpacking what these words mean, either to us or to them. Maybe religious is the easiest of the two. We UUs are a religious body because we join together in practices designed to help us approach life questions. Questions like, who is in charge? What happens when we die? Is there a purpose in my life? How do we know right from wrong? Unlike most denominations, we don't provide answers, but we do build a community of seekers that share and support one another as each of us grapples with finding answers that work for us. We meet regularly and engage in behaviors and rituals that we hope will sustain each of us in our search. In simplest form, we are religious because we formed a church and we come to church to worship together. And the extent to which we act and look like a traditional religion might serve as a deterrent to some possible participants. Maybe we might use a word with less emotional baggage than church to define us. But I don't know if that would help. But the deeper issue is not what we call ourselves, but what we are and what we actually do and how well we do it. This entails an expansive range of possibilities and practices, but it is always built from a central notion that I will call spirituality. Many balk at the word spiritual because it can invoke a sense of the supernatural. It refers to things that are not human and not physically known to us. Ghosts are spirits. Gods are spirits. But these are drawn from older uses of the term and are by no means essential to the idea of spirituality. If we look to more modern usages, we find that spirit is understood more as a vital principle for humans and that it's derived from the Latin for breath. If I asked each of you what you mean by the term spiritual, I would expect to get at least as many answers as there are people here. I know I have a couple of different answers, but most of you would agree that it somehow refers to a quality of our lives that eclipses the routine in every day. Commonly, we might express that we are looking for something more from our lives. Most people use the term spirituality to describe an emotional state of awareness that comes from our intimate relationships and involvement with other persons and with our connection to the rest of the universe. When we leave traditional religion behind, we also leave the idea of a sentient supernatural power behind. Some of us might hold some inklings of these ideas, but we do it in our own way. Spirituality then takes on the role of searching for and interpreting what is meaningful about our world. What we know as spirituality is deeply personal. It is our way to pursue deep and more meaningful connections. It necessarily touches on the dimensions of our lives that deal with values, truth, meaning, love, integrity, joy, and happiness. We perceive our relation to what is spiritual in our own way. Some of us feel a transcendent force or energy that is external to us, and we give it names like spirit of life, spirit of love, or God. The spiritual catalyzes in our consciousness from many different stimuli. I am one of the many here that finds a deep spiritual meaning in nature. And I marvel at the beauty and complexity of creation that surrounds us. I have an assortment of photos that cycle through on my phone, and I'm immediately transported to a special way of being when I see images like a redwood forest or a Northwoods lake. I don't really control this response, but the pictures and the memories from nature feed something deep within me. We find the spiritual in our connections with other people, especially those we're closest to. The bonds we forge in love and familiarity build something palpable and precious in our hearts, and we rely on these bonds to bring us identity and to give our lives meaning. Our strongest feelings are responses to family and loved ones, but we can connect through other associations as well. One of the best reasons to come to church is to experience the presence of this assembled congregation each time we gather. We have created a space and a time that it encourages us individually and collectively to pursue the challenges in our lives. In church, I hope that most of you feel warmth, feel safety, and feel acceptance from each other. Traditional religion tended to treat spirituality as the process of aligning one's life with God, the supernatural creator and benefactor of all life. Spiritual actions involve participating in rituals, engaging in devotions, and sharing feelings through prayer. Many people continue to find deep meaning and inspiration in these religious lives, and engagement can bring emotional connection and motivate a person to pursue a life of goodness and compassion. But in this world of religion, the object of most spiritual efforts almost always involved obtaining a oneness with God. But without fixed religious instruction, the path to spiritual growth is left undefined. And this is where the UU commitment to the independent search for truth and meaning comes into play. Meaning and understanding are not provided, but must be explored and uncovered by each of us separately. We don't have to do it alone, but we alone are responsible to get it done. As we engage in a process of self-discernment, we generally try to attend to those things that we feel are most important to us, that are fundamental in making our lives and our values work for us and make sense. I often encourage people to try to define those aspects of their life that they feel are most sacred and fundamental to their being. And this exploration is ongoing. It never has a final resolution, and it requires concentrated effort. The process shares equally between our emotional and rational spheres. It engages what we know with what we feel. Thoughtfulness is central to spirituality. Not thought without feeling, but thoughts about the meaning of life and the profound feelings that such thoughts engender. In many ways, seeking the spiritual is a tremendous effort to discover and realize our better selves. Again, it embraces love, trust, reverence, and wisdom, and helps us to prepare for tragedy and eventually death. I think I understand our approach to the spiritual as creating the potential to be open to the messages of our hearts and our minds, and to engage with the mysteries that surround us. We must be prepared to experience the wonder and awe that we feel when exposed to the parts of existence that are larger than us and probably beyond our control. And we must be honest and self-critical as we process our own feelings and desires. I try to be ready to feel and accept inspiration, which is one way to know the spiritual. There are definitely things we can do to open ourselves to spiritual thoughts and feelings. Let's start by claiming our participation in this church as a positive step. And many of us have practices that we have adopted to enhance our readiness to engage with the spiritual. For some, it is a daily walk, with or without the dog, or a regular excursion to a forest preserve or a natural place. For others, it's a regular meditation practice or participation in a yoga class. Some find inspiration through music, the arts, or literature. Many paths are possible, as long as they have the potential to bring new insight and to channel our efforts away from the parts of life we might know is the daily grind. I'm skeptical of persons who claim that they are spiritual, with or without religion, unless they actively and deliberately engage in processes that feed their spiritual well-being. If you were one to question whether personal spiritual growth is an important aspect of Unitarian Universalism, you can now hear me claim that I think it is the most important thing we do. Our ability to engage with all of the principles and values we espouse as a group relies on our individual well-being and our ability to maintain a perspective that helps us hold the world we live in a loving embrace. Amen. Blessed be. We now will do something. And we will sing. This is a new song, I believe. It's number 4 in the Gray Hymnal, and the title is "I Brought My Spirit to the Sea." Let's see how this works.